is Mabel van Oranje. I'm the CEO of an organization called The Elders, which is explained on this lovely leaflet that you'll find on the way out, or it's maybe distributed on the chairs. And the chairman of The Elders is Archbishop Tutu. And we'll talk maybe about it a little bit more later. This session is about a subject that I think has never been discussed either at the Skoll World Forum or in any fora like this. We often talk in the context of social entrepreneurs, of people who are trying to lead big change, about the external challenges that we face, about how we can grow our organizations, how we can skill up our work, how we can better use social media, how we can become better leaders of our teams. But we talk very little about the internal dimensions of leadership. Maybe because these are sensitive issues, they're personal, we might have to show our weaknesses. And yesterday, Jeff, in his opening remarks, referred to the fact that social entrepreneurs are often very courageous people, very determined. But after all, we're all human. And so I'm wondering, where do we go when we get frustrated? How do you stay sane when you see human tragedy happening around you every day? How do you stay motivated when you see that change is not happening as quickly as you had envisioned it? What do you do when everybody around you says that you're absolutely mad to follow that big vision, that dream that you have? What do you do when your kids ask you, why are you again trying to help others and why you're not there on my birthday? Who supports you? And how do you stay balanced and energized? Those are some of the questions that we would like to discuss this morning. And we have an amazing panel to do so. Let me quickly tell you a little bit about them. Cecilia Flores-Oebanda is the founder and also executive director of the Visayan Forum Foundation from the Philippines. She has an amazing life story. She was a child laborer to help to make sure that her family would survive. She fought as an insurgent against the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines. She and her husband were in prison for 4 years. She didn't see her first child for 12 years. 2 of her children were actually born in prison. And then when democracy came to the Philippines, she founded her foundation to help other people achieve freedom and to be able to live decent lives. And her foundation has done absolutely amazing work, especially in the field of human trafficking. Joe, who's sitting here, comes from India. He runs and founded an organization called Vikas. He has an amazing life story, like I guess everybody in this room. He grew up in a state in India that had the first Marxist government that ever was in power anywhere in the world. He was a troublemaker at school. His parents had to send him off, or decided to send him off to boarding school. But he quickly decided to use all these rebellious energies to actually helping others. So in 1971, he started helping communities that were ravaged by a cyclone at that time. And in 1979, he founded Vikas, which was initially focused on renewable energy for rural communities, but fairly quickly changed into a more holistic development model. And his work has affected hundreds of thousands of people. Paul Farmer, for everybody who was here last year, will remember his amazing speech. I can't remember if it was the opening or the closing session. Opening session, but it brought many of us to tears. He is the founder and one of the co-leaders of Partners in Health, which basically is trying to prove that cost-effective, high-quality healthcare can be delivered even to those who are living in the most hopeless of situations. He founded Partners in Health in 1987, and they keep working on a community-based healthcare system. And he's a great advocate for global health equality as well. And then the man next to me, Art, the chairman of the Elders. I don't think he really needs an introduction. And even if I try to give an introduction, those people who are introducing him tonight, when he gets his award, will probably get very upset because I might be taking some of their words away. So I'm just going to tell you 1 or 2 things about him. Others call him the South Africa's moral conscience. He's described as the world's most famous champion for human rights. I know him as the man, the only man I think in the world, the only person in the world, who can herd cats who can keep order in an unruly bunch of 10 former heads of state and former secretary generals, which is what the elders is. People like Jimmy Carter, Kofi Annan, Grassa Machel, Lakhdar Brahimi. He keeps them in good order. And on top of all that, he never forgets any birthday of any of them, or their wives, or their wedding anniversaries, and always congratulates them. That's the heart he has. That's how amazing he is. Now, these panelists are going to be brief, and they're going to be brilliant. But we're not going to have them talk all the time. As I mentioned, these questions of inner leadership, I'm convinced that all of us struggle with them at times. So we want to involve you as much as possible in the discussion. But that means that even though they're going to be brief and brilliant, when one of you gets the floor, you can try to outshine them, but you have to stay shorter than their interventions. Anyway, we have a lot of ground to cover. We want to create a real dialogue. But let us get started by the following question that I have for all four of you. And that is, every social entrepreneur, every social change maker had one or more moments in the past where you said, look, I'm going to do something completely different. I have this vision. I want to create this kind of change. These initial moments of motivation. Now, I guess we can all, after what I said a bit about your backgrounds, know a little bit about what motivated you at the beginning. What I'm very curious about is, to which extent are you still driven by that vision of change, by that drive that you had 10, 20, 40, 50 years ago? Cecilia, would you like to start?
Well, I think my passion started when I was actually in prison and living in prison with my children and, of course, separated from my son. I thought that our life in prison is really the worst life that everybody can have. But after we rescue victims of human trafficking, I realized that actually our life is really nothing compared to them. And from them, I really resolved that freedom is very important. And I will never give up. I will continue to do it. And how can I give up? How can I betray the girls that are actually trafficked from the far-flung community in Philippines and sold to prostitution, sold to slavery? You know, I don't know, but for me, my vision and my passion is always consistent. My belief in the goodness of God, and my belief in freedom is always intact. So I would say that maybe the life is changing, you know, the situation is changing, but that passion and that vision is always consistent and always will be, and will never give up in any difficult circumstances, because it means a life of a girl. It means a life of 80 person that I rescue before I come here. It means a future of Filipinos to explore opportunities without the risk of being sold and enslaved. It is a future of next generation, and I offer my life until the last drop of my blood to continue that vision.
Paul.
When I was thinking about the question, I realized that you can back the answer up a long way. Anybody can perform autobiographical tricks to do so. So I was thinking, not when I first decided I wanted to be a doctor who focused his attention on people living in poverty, but when I realized it was too late to go back. And I'm glad some of you chuckle, because it's a pretty frightening feeling, actually. I'm sure others in this room have felt it. And for me, it was in the course of several months, I can't remember how many, when I was in my early 20s, my mid-20s, and I had started medical school and was going between Harvard and Haiti. And my friends in Haiti were my age mates. They were peers. And we'd worked together on a health survey and traveled all over villages in that part of central Haiti. And one of them died of ileal perforation due to typhoid disease before he ever saw his 30th birthday. Another one, who became the record keeper in the clinic we just built, died of puerperal sepsis from having a baby under poor conditions. And the third of these friends I lost died of cerebral malaria misdiagnosed as having a psychiatric illness because she went crazy with cerebral malaria. And that determined many things. I decided what kind of doctor I wanted to be, where I would focus my energy, and I feel as passionate about those kinds of tragedies and medical errors now as I did then. And the difference, of course, is that in those places where I first saw them, they're gone. We don't have those kind of errors, really. Women don't die in childbirth. They don't die of obstructed labor. They don't die, of illegal perforation because we put in clean water, and that the cholera that's spreading across Haiti is not. They're referred to us from other places, but we see this all over the world, and as a result, we've tried to move our energies around the world too, because we're hoping as people who believe in basic rights, social and economic rights, and civil and political rights, that anybody in the world can understand what it might like to be sick and alone. And we find that people, like this quest for freedom, people understand that everyone of God's creatures needs accompaniment and help when they're sick. So I do feel just as passionate now.
Joe.
I was always thrilled by the notion of equity. So I was appalled to see when I was a small boy. At one time I was a small boy. Of 10 years that I come from, at that time, my family comes from the state of Kerala. My mother's father, grandfather, he would line up the people who were working in the field and would have a hole in the ground and then would pass a banana leaf over fire so it becomes very supple, push that in, and then would pour rice gruel into the leaf, which is in the hole. So one day I saw this and I went up to him and said, "This is the way you might feed dogs, not human beings." And he turned to me and asked me, "Are they any better?" I was shocked. How could a human being say about another human being, even if he is my grandfather, in this manner? So I think it was at that time, if I begin to trace, I cannot say that I made certainly a decision, but that was the moment when I said, this is not right. If I can do something to make it right, I will do it. But how? I did not know. So I began to organize the laborers of my father. He kicked me out. I went to a boarding school. There I thought, I am God's own answer to the organizational needs of all these schools, so I began to organize the students. So I was kicked out from school, came to the university, became also the president of the university, but this thing of inequity that prevailed in our society, where there was this untouchability of the people who were so-called untouchables or low caste, people who were tribal, separated from the society. And I said, okay, this is where I will work, and did not take up a career, went to villages. There was a cyclone. I started working in Orissa, but always this idea of equity. And today, after many years of travel, if we are in the field of water and sanitation, that is Gram Vikas, because I see that water and sanitation is needed by everyone. If there is even one family which does not practice proper sanitation, it can defile everyone else's water. So we took that as a point to come together for the entire community in total inclusion and then proceed further. This is how that that search for equity, and that's still continuing. There's tremendous inequity, economic, social, any sphere that you take in India, and the journey continues still.
Well,
Arch, it's your turn.
thank you so very much. May I first of all pay a very, very warm tribute to all of you. You are amazing people. And you awe me. I mean, as I listen to the incredible things that you do, all of you, you make one so proud of being human. And thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of the many, many, many who would want to thank you, who often do not have that opportunity. And thank you on behalf of God, because I think there must be many times when God says, whatever got into me to create that lot? and then God sees you and others like you, and God says, they have vindicated me. You have vindicated God. And that's for real. Please know that there are many in the world who would wish to be eloquent enough to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also wanted to thank you for the very warm welcome that you gave me, and sort of making me think I was something. One day, Leah and I got on a train in Atlanta, and somebody thought they recognized me, and so they came and they were asking for autographs. And I tried to look suitably modest as I was signing these autographs. And one lady came up and she pushed a piece of paper in front of me, and as I was signing, she turned to these people and said, "Who is he? Who is he?" So I thought it was very good for the soul. One day, I was, I think maybe 7 or 8. I went with my father, who was headmaster of a school. And so in the black community, a very important man. And we went into town, segregated, of course. And we got into the shop, and there was a slip of a girl behind the counter, a white girl. And when it was our turn to be served, I was standing next to my father, and this girl said to my father, "Yes, boy." And I wondered how my father must have felt being humiliated in front of his small boy. But I got to know, because several years later, our last child was born in London, and she knew nothing about South Africa's apartheid, and she was 3, and I'm walking with her, and I've got her by the hand, and she saw some children on swings and roundabouts. And she said, Daddy, I want to go on the swing. And I said, no, darling, you can't. She said, but there are other children on this. And how do you tell your child, you are not like other children. You are a black child. I knew then how my father must have felt. I wished the ground would open up and swallow me. And then a little later, still in the same town, I was riding a bicycle. I was the only black boy who had his own bicycle. My father used to send me to town to go and buy newspapers and things. And I went past a school for white children. Again, they're all segregated. And saw 3 kids from my ghetto. And they were scavenging in the school rubbish bin, getting out perfectly lovely apples and things, because the government was providing school feeding to white kids who didn't really need it. They preferred their mother's lunch packets. And much, much later, Verwoerd was to say why black children who needed it were not being supplied with school feeding. He said, because we can't feed all, we won't feed some. Imagine Paul saying, well, I can't cure all of you here, so I'm not going to try and cure any. I can't say that made me really get sort of hot under the collar very much, no. But it was later, Leah and I were school teachers. And the same Verwoerd introduced something called Bantu education. An education deliberately designed to produce docile, unthinking black children. He said, why do you teach black children mathematics? What are they going to do with mathematics? They must know enough English and Afrikaans to understand instructions by their white masters and mistresses. Don't let them hear anything about the American War of Independence or the French Revolution. These are going to put bad ideas into their heads. And Leah and I said, we're not going to collaborate with this gruel, thin gruel being fed to our children. But I was inspired by some incredible human beings, Trevor Huddleston, and then I was into this really by default, because the Nelson Mandelas were in jail, others were in exile, and nature does not allow for vacuums. And so I just happened, well, humanly speaking, I just happened to be the first black person to be Dean of Johannesburg and was given a platform. And as they sometimes say, the rest is history.
the speakers are not allowed to bring the moderator to tears. Thank you. I would like to first talk a bit about one set of questions, which is the question of how do you keep going? Where do you turn when you feel that the challenges that you're facing are too big? What do you do when your child is accusing you of not being there at important moments in his or her life? And before we open this part of the discussion up, I wanted to ask you, Joe, when we spoke a little while ago, you said, I started 30 years ago, and the change that we have achieved is so far away from what I had envisioned at that time. There's still so much to do. How do you keep going when you have the feeling it's not going quickly enough? And how do you deal with some of these internal questions of frustration, of doubt?
Unlike the Archbishop, 35 years ago I was not so modest. I thought that in a few years I'm going to change India. So I set out. And, well, India is almost where it was. But my colleagues and me, we have been struggling on a path of justice, on a path of equity, on a path of well-being for the poor. But often it's hard. I remember my first child was born, and I was in a remote village, and I was there for 10 days. Only after 10 days when I come back, I realized I'm a father. So I thought, okay, anyway, I'll try again. So
The stock was working overtime.
my second child, the daughter was born again. I think my wife, I told her I want to be there, but then she miscalculated the dates. And I was again in a far-off indigenous village, and I was very happy to come and say, oh, I have a daughter. I said, okay, I must try once more. The third child, again, I was not there. And each time, on one side I used to laugh at the irony that the more determined I got that I should be there in these big moments, the further I was away. This can bring you down now and then. There are times when I wanted that, change that in that village where they would forget their differences, where the rich would show some semblance of concern and care for the poor. And it didn't happen. Maybe the 10th meeting, nothing happened. There would be times when I would just take the pillow and cry into the pillow. So how do we go on? Then I said, I discovered this terrific elixir, this tonic. Whenever my battery was down, really, really low, then, and I realized that if the battery is beyond a certain level and it's down, it needs what is called a bench charge. So I would go out into the villages where the people have come together, worked among themselves. We were a part of that, and they built whatever it is, whether it is a good agriculture system, total inclusion, total sanitation, a water supply system for which they were paying. And people say, oh, we have done it. We could do it. Yes, you helped us a little bit, yes, but we did it. 1 or 2 villages and living 2 or 3 days and nights with those people, further living in their ambition, further dreaming up with them, that would give me a complete battery charge, bench charge. You see, usually a battery gets a bench charge in a few hours, but my battery is a very poor battery. And so it needed 2 to 3 days. But I got charged, came back, a new person, fully charged up. And I could go on, and I could, because of that, I always took some extra charge with me so that I could also plug into my colleagues' batteries. So they would also go. So ultimately for me, my staying power, how I can go on, is because of the people with whom I work. I agree. I had set out to change the whole of India, and I mean, there's a hole in India now. I have not managed anywhere near that. But when I see that, oh, what did I set out for and where have I reached, then I remember what Mother Teresa said. I may be a drop in the ocean. I may be a drop in a bucket. But without that drop, the bucket would be poorer by that drop. So I only want to be that drop. And I do everything possible to be a good drop. That's all. Thank you.
Cecilia, how do you keep going?
Well, to be honest, there are times that I also, caught in the crossroad. The first time and the last times that I actually almost give up is when I received the first death threat from the traffickers. Living in prison and a single mother of 4, it is really very hard for me because I need to make a choice for the safety of my children and this, and the freedom that I fought for the other girls. While our friends are talking about maybe other things, I would like to concentrate as a mother, and how I balance my life. Because honestly speaking, I have never balanced life. I have a life in prison, a husband who left the poor children, a single mother, running after trafficker, filing cases, heal the victims. I can never have that kind of life. But I would say that, yes, indeed, I think I'm managing well. Because I believe that I cannot survive alone. We have people that work with us. My children love my work and take pride of my work. They make an extra effort to make my life, my difficult life, easier. They help in whatever they can. My colleagues are always there to support me. We always journey together, and that makes my life balanced. Because I don't think that balance is, just as a thing that you really, that balance is a gift. It's the gift that you can give to yourself. It's a balance that keeps you going. At the same time, how could I give up? When a 14-year-old girl was sold to prostitution, forced to insert a cotton dipped in the pigeon's blood in her sixth organ to be just marketed as virgin many times, how can you give up? When the girl who is only 14 years old was sold in Syria to work as a domestic worker and sold to multiple employers and put into jail, and they never give up. They still have hope in their hearts. this still wants to go on. No? So we cannot betray that kind of trust. I cannot be selfish and just bring my children and be safe, because that's not me. I'm a very stubborn girl. I'm a very stubborn woman. And with all the harassment and with all the death threats and everything, I find it now more exciting. Especially that I have the school community. I know Jeff Skoll, I know Sally. You know, before I come here, my goodness, I'm like a kitten who is really afraid. I don't know what to do. I'm struggling as a person because the problem is too big. But I have my community. I have the trust, and I have the power of the people, especially the women that we save, to continue fighting. And for me, that keeps me going. And I will have a high energy, as always. and beyond everything, I think I'm still very lucky that I was called, and I follow and serve, given the opportunity to make my life worth, and given the opportunity to serve and make this life really worth living for. And I'm really grateful for that.